Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today, I have a fascinating individual with me, Sean Killingsworth of the Reconnect Movement. Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We met in person, right, in D.C. Whose office were we at?
Senator Bloomberg?
Senator
Really?
Bloomberg? No, Blumenthal? Senator Blumenthal. I
Sorry.
know. Yeah, no, Senator Blumenthal. We got to go to a meeting with Jonathan Haidt and some other really amazing advocates in this space and express our concern right to the senator. And that was really cool. I'm really interested in your story, and we're here today to share that with parents who are listening. So can we just start by going back and telling me about when you got your first smartphone? Like, how old were you? What kind of phone was it? Just fill me in on those details.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was, as far as most of the people and most of the kids in my generation, I was pretty late. My mom pushed it off for me. So I got my first phone and social media in 8th grade.
That's late?
Yeah, that was way late. I mean, most of my friends had iPods when I was, 11, 12, I was late.
Wow. Okay. So by then, a lot of kids already had access to social media or just had phones?
It was social media and phones. I mean, most of my friends who had a phone, their parents they weren't worried about social media. They had no idea,
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, my mom is like, write me 4 pages in an essay about why you need to be safe online. I'm like, Mom, come on.
Whoa, your mom is awesome.
She's really awesome. Yeah.
I wonder how she knew to have you be understanding the harms of it. Was it just like organic, like she just realized it, or did someone cue her in? Like, how did she know?
She's really intelligent, and I think that she just had the common sense to know, like, social media, you're accessible to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this young kid, like, he can talk to anybody, people can reach out to him. I think she just kind of put it together, like, that might not be the best situation.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, most parents didn't realize that. They thought it was just where kids connect with their friends and see funny videos. And that's not exactly what it was. So let me do some math. What year was that when you were in 8th grade?
It would have been like 2016, 2017. So yeah, I went into my freshman year. It was 2017 to 2018. That was my freshman year of high school.
So TikTok was hitting right around there, 2016.
It was more Instagram and Snapchat then, at least for me. I mean, those were the ones I was heavily into when I first got social media.
Okay.
TikTok, in my experience, blew up my sophomore, junior year, more my junior year.
Okay.
And then there was this this singularity where by the time we were in senior year, it was like you were the odd one out if you didn't have TikTok. Everybody had TikTok. Everybody knew it dictated culture. And that was really weird to go in 1 year. It just totally changed.
So, the algorithm is like the most powerful and addictive algorithm ever. No wonder all the kids immediately got addicted to it. But back when you first got your phone, did you sign up for those social media platforms, Instagram and Snapchat, right away?
Yeah, so that's a funny story. My mom, so when she got me my smartphone, because she made a point. She was very big into this. And if you let me, I'll actually jump back further.
Yeah. Sure.
And so, because my story with all of this really starts when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
When I was going into my mom sent me to an after school daycare because I was homeschooled at the time, and I was, she wanted me to go hang out with other kids, right? And I think I asked her, I'm like,
yeah.
So I went to this daycare, and I remember we toured it. And there was it was like bins and bins of Legos, and there was this super cool playground at the back, and there was all these board games and blocks and tons of stuff to do. And we toured it, just me, my brother, and my mom, and we was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the best thing ever. I can't wait to play with all these kids.
Yeah.
And I got there the first day after school, and all of the kids were in a dimly lit, the main room. Everyone had a DS or a Game Boy. And everyone was just sitting in a room in a circle, and everybody was just playing Pokemon. And I was the only kid that didn't have a DS. And so none of the kids were playing. I was completely left out. I was just forced to sit and look over someone's shoulder the whole daycare.
Oh man.
And it was that. I look back and I'm like, man, that is that's not normal. Like I went to a daycare and there were no kids playing. No one was running, jumping. No one wanted to play. It was, so that was
where's
like
the person in charge of the daycare being like, guys, maybe we shouldn't be sitting there with our eyes on a screen. Like if it feels obvious, maybe that's just a new thing. I don't know.
Well, that I can actually answer that question. I remember it was like kind of students. I think it was like college students that were running the daycare. They were like the employees that were doing it.
Yeah.
And they were like, sweet, we don't have to watch anyone. They were just sitting there and they would just kind of, I remember the college kids would just be talking but they didn't have to do any work. You know, it was super easy for them. So
Jeez Louise. Okay. So you remember that. That's really interesting. And I mean, even my son who goes to an after school program on Wednesdays, because they get out early on Wednesdays, and some of the kids that are in there, they are able to do their homework there. So the homework is on iPads. And so they have their iPads there to do their homework. But I mean, a kid, what is a stat like? When a kid goes to do some schoolwork on their device, they can last 6 minutes before they start playing a game or going on social media or doing something else. So my son is over the other kids' shoulders, just watching them play these games because my son doesn't have an iPad and I've opted him out. I had to talk to the teachers about, can we just not have them use it? Or I can't control what other kids are doing. So, and maybe they are doing homework. So can we have my son not be over their shoulder? But that's like, it's so hard because it's so integrated into their lives now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's actually where my whole story and my whole angle on this thing comes in, is because, you know, it wasn't that it was my fault. Like I didn't have the DS. I was spending zero time. So if you measure my childhood for screen time usage, like at that time in that daycare, I was at zero. I spent no time on my screen. Yeah. But because everyone else had their personal screen, I was left out. I had nowhere to play. There was an absence of childhood environment occurring that I couldn't participate in. So I was powerless. Yeah.
There was no play-based anything. So that's a really interesting experience that you had. And that was back in, I don't know, 2010 maybe? 2008?
Yeah.
2008,
2010, yeah.
Okay. So then you finally get a phone. And what happens when you download social media?
Yeah. So just for the sake of how funny this is, I have to say it. My mom, so like I said, she made me write an essay, but she said that I had to wait like one more month or something before I could even apply with my essay to get the social media.
Okay.
And I remember it was some period of time. I don't remember what it was. It was like a thing. I had to pass a test first or something. And but I had the phone. I just couldn't have the app. And so I'm at school. Everybody's in a group chat. Everybody's on Instagram. Everybody's posting. Everybody's like Snapchat. Like this is it. The pull of the level of feeling of missing out was unbearable. It was, I had to download it. I was just, at least that's how I felt at the time, you know?
Yeah, totally.
It was like all of my friends were on group chats. That's how they all made plans. That's how they all were talking, sending memes to each other, you know? So it was like, I wasn't talking to my friends the way where everybody else was. So I got Instagram and Snapchat secretly, and I downloaded them, and like, you know, was trying to do it secretively, but she wouldn't let me keep my phone in my room at night.
Good.
So I forgot to like turn it off, or I forgot to turn the notifications off. So I put it in her room, and it was just like going off every 5 seconds. Right. And so she like went to turn it off and saw all these notifications. And so then she found out, and instead of just telling me, she went on my Instagram and posted all these like mashup pictures of her like mom's wine night, hashtag hacked my son's Instagram. Like embarrassed me.
Your mom is so cool.
I know, she was so funny. And so, but she posted all these funny pictures, and she was like, it was really funny. It got me to like be like, oh no, you know, and then I wrote an essay eventually, but
Okay. So once you had approval to use the platforms, what was your experience like? Did it feel safe? Did it feel appropriate?
Yes. So, well, not yes as if it felt appropriate, but when I first used it, my main grievances were I wasn't necessarily, I find myself to be pretty lucky. I wasn't exposed to like any, like I didn't lose my innocence immediately, like seeing a bunch of like adult content right away.
Yeah.
For me, my main experience with it was the fact that as soon as I got it, it was impossible to escape it, because my main experience was that was how you were supposed to get to know a girlfriend. Like if I was interested in a girl and we kind of had a little thing going, it wasn't normal to ask them on a date and then you go to a movie. It was normal to be in the talking phase on Snapchat. And that was kind of how you got to know each other, was like trying to be smooth over Snapchat. And I just like found that it gave me so much anxiety having to send pictures of my face all the time. And like, it was so uncomfortable and it was a terrible way to interact with someone. Like you really hold a real conversation. So that was the main thing that I was like immediately kind of taken back by, that I didn't enjoy about it.
How did it affect like your activities? So obviously these platforms are addictive. So kids have a hard time finding balance between using their device and like doing other things. So how did you find a good balance there? Was it hard?
It felt impossible. And that was my experience. And that was what was reflected in how I spent my time on it. It was because at this point, also when I had my phone, going into freshman year of high school, I mean, my mom was paying attention, but at the same time, it's like, what are you going to do? I'm at school all day and then I come home, I'm watching whatever it is. And so it was kind of just like my phone became this hub of Snapchat, Instagram, which are these like necessities, right? Snapchat is where everybody makes plans, where if you make a friend, you have to get their Snapchat, or it's like you're not their friend, or you're going to miss out on being, hanging out with them. And so that's a social requirement. And then I have Instagram, which is, if I don't post Instagram and have like posts of me doing things, then nobody's going to know who I am. And I need to have a presence. So I had to have that. And so, but that results in those two things are on my phone. And we all know from watching The Social Dilemma and all the things that you educate people about is that these apps aren't just sitting in your home dock waiting for you to pick them up. They're calling to you actively, going down into your brainstem, getting you to use them. So I was on it all the time, specifically Instagram. I would spend hours and hours just scrolling, looking at what my friends are posting, posting myself. And I definitely felt the loss of time and control over being able to spend time on it or not. It felt impossible.
Okay. What about your mental health state? How did that look at the time? Yeah.
So the main ways that that social media affected my mental health was through comparison, because and FOMO, like fear of missing out. And I know you hear that a lot. And looking back, those are the two most notable. But it's just because that's at that age, like, that's what you're doing. You're hyper comparing yourself, hyper analyzing yourself, like super insecure. You care a ton about what other people are doing, who they're hanging out with. You want to hang out with them. And so I just remember like comparing when I would see other people posting with friends. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not hanging out with my friends. I'm a loser, or they're hanging out without me. And then also I was really into skateboarding, my main hobby, interest. And I would watch videos of skateboarders that were better than me, that were like my same age. And I remember it just kill my motivation, and it would just like kill my desire to like get better. And it would like really hurt my feelings of like being good at it. And I would just compare myself to skateboarding. But then it's also really addicting because you want to watch the skateboarding, but it doesn't feel disconnected, because it's like, it's a kid just like you. You post your videos, they post theirs. They're just better.
Yeah.
And so those are the main ways that it kind of hurt my mental health at the time.
A couple years in, you have TikTok now. So what was your experience with TikTok?
So I actually have a slightly different path, I would say, because by the time I got out of my freshman year, I was so sick of having to fight these apps. Like I was deleting them. I was deleting Instagram because I was sick of being stuck on it and comparing myself. Yeah. And then I would just re-download it and delete it and re-download it. So I actually eventually got a flip phone in my sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
And so my experience with when TikTok was a thing was people are making jokes throughout the day that I just have no base of understanding from. So I was just feeling very left out.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get to the flip phone experience in a minute, but were other kids having the same issues as you back to when you had your smartphone?
I mean, yeah, 100%. It was pretty much everyone was on the same page with the fact that we all are using this probably too much. This is probably bad for us. And, you'd hear people say like, oh yeah, I hate social media, but we all hate it. But at the end of the day, everyone just uses it. It was so ingrained.
Yeah. And do you feel like since then for young people, it's gotten better or worse?
It's gotten like more extreme with how connected and interconnected it feels with social media and social life.
Yeah.
for example, I was visiting DC not too long ago, and I was staying with a friend of mine who lives in a college dorm.
Mhm.
And I was at one point in one of his friends, rooms on his hall, and I asked him, because we talked about Reconnect a little bit. He was asking me questions, but I asked him, I was like, do you think that you use your phone too much, whatever? And he was like, oh yeah, obviously. I actually asked him, well, when did you get your phone, like that, all that type of stuff? And he said, I had a phone since I was 11 or whatever it was. These kids are a little bit younger than me.
Yeah.
And I asked him, how did you feel about it? And he said, I wish I grew up before it. I wish I never had it.
Mm.
And I was like, wait, why? And he said, because I didn't make any friends all of elementary school and middle school. Like, I just spent my time on my phone and played video games. And then by the time I got to high school, I made friends, and I had a friend group of guys. And I realized that was way more fun, but I never knew that. And so I had just lost all of middle school to the device, and I didn't know it. And so now he tries to be off of it, but he said it's just, you have to be on it.
Okay. So would you advise parents to not give their kids smartphones in middle school?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's the best case scenario. But the focus that I have on it, and like I mentioned and alluded to a little bit earlier, is that right now it's kind of a losing battle, which is, it's like a lose-lose situation, because if you don't give your kid a smartphone, then they end up like me or your son, who's looking over the shoulder of someone else because everybody's on their phones. So that is, also not great. I still think that that's a better outcome than all the things that can happen to you for having a smartphone throughout middle school and all those symptoms.
Yeah.
And they'll thank you later. That's the biggest thing. I was so mad at my mom for not giving me a phone, not giving me a DS, not letting me get Instagram. I look back and I am so thankful for her, and I thank her all the time. And so if your kid is angry with you for not doing it, just know they'll thank you later.
Thank you for stating that so clearly, because it's so important to remember that. And I hope that the looking over the shoulder thing is slowly going to not be a thing when it comes to school, because so many schools are actually banning phones now. So hopefully we're getting to a point where when your kid goes to school, if they don't have a phone, that doesn't mean they're that different, because no one else is allowed to use it. So it's about implementation, right? But you were what age when you switched out your smartphone for a flip phone?
I was 15 turning 16.
That is a wild thing to do for a 15 and 16-year-old.
Passionate.
Yeah. Tell me about that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a culmination of, like I was saying, it was this impossible battle. Like that was my answer. It was impossible. There was nothing I could do. It was the pull was too strong, and I was sick of it. I was sick of the fight, and I was also sick of my only interactions and my main form of interaction with people being Snapchat, because that was what was the most acceptable. And I can't speak for kids that are in high school now, but it seems to be the same case, where Snapchat has taken the primary kind of social forefront of interacting with people.
Yeah.
And it was so hard to genuinely connect with someone over Snapchat. I just kind of gave up, and really my whole journey started when I got my flip phone. It felt like, or another chapter of it, because what I discovered when I got my flip phone was I went into school with no smartphone, no social media connection, nothing. And
where did you get this idea though? Like, before we get into how it affected you after, like, did someone suggest it? Did your mom probably, I don't know. Cause was someone else doing it? Or are you just so you're so evolved? Because this is crazy.
Man, I don't even know. I wish I remembered. I think it must have been, I used to watch movies all the time from before smartphones and everything like that. And I think I just fantasized about the time that it was only a flip phone. And so I was like, well, those have to be still around. And so I think that was what it was.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So you walk into school without a smartphone. Now you have a flip phone. And what is that like?
Yes. So it was the main realization throughout that day. And I'll never forget for walking into school, because I remember it was like a notable feeling of, I didn't have this out. All I had was me and the school. That was all I had to interact with, because usually when I'm walking into school, I'm managing an inbox of 5 friends and, looking at comments and all this stuff. That's all interaction, Yeah. And so it was kind of a weird feeling, but that forced me to really be looking up and really be paying attention to those around me, to connect with them.
Yeah.
And so I saw this girl that I recognized when I was walking in from my car. I think I was driving at the time. And she was on her phone, and I walked up to her. I was like, hey, what's going on? I started trying to have a conversation with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like I was talking to her, like trying to look her in the eye, and she was walking parallel to me, just like looking down on her phone, like, yeah. And I remember like I said something to her, like kept talking. I knew this girl, like we had a class together, we sat next to each other.
Yeah.
And I remember I asked her a question or something, and she just didn't even respond to me. Like she was just on her phone. And this is someone right next to me, walking next to me. I know. And I just had that moment where I was like, what is happening right now? And then I continued the rest of the day. I kind of was like, okay, later. And then I walked and I saw the courtyard of the school, and where all the picnic tables are. And there were all these benches lining the courtyard of like, kids were sitting on them. And I remember seeing like, oh my gosh, I see 2 kids not on their phone. Like it was this kid sitting on their phone. These 2 girls are sitting next to each other, showing each other something on their phone. This guy's on his computer with his headphones in. And it was like everybody was on their phone. And I saw it. And I was like realizing that it wasn't that I was, spending too much time on my phone. I didn't even have a phone. It was that I couldn't go out and talk to everybody. People weren't waiting for me to come up and talk to them. People were checked out. And so that's kind of when I realized that this is a bigger issue than just screen time, because the physical environment I was walking into to try to make friends was desolate. There was like so few opportunities to connect with people.
That's so sad.
And I could talk about that for forever, but
yeah,
that was the experience with it.
And it's wild that it took you removing the smartphone to actually notice it. I mean, that's how it had been for years, but you just didn't even see it because you were also looking down.
Exactly.
Oy vey.
That's really where Reconnect, the idea for Reconnect was birthed, because that year started out once I noticed that and I was experiencing my whole school year like that from that lens, I couldn't unsee it. And so I was kind of constantly writing about it, journaling about it in my notebooks, and writing out documents about it, just all of my experiences. And it was just wild to not have that opportunity. So I started Reconnect as the idea of, okay, I'm going into school, I can talk to people, I'm fine. Like I felt the like smartphone ooze, or like whatever the funk was, it like washed off me in about 2 weeks. Where I was like totally not uncomfortable anymore. I wasn't socially anxious at all. I was like good to talk. It just took like some time, some distance from the phone.
Totally.
So I realized like, okay, I can talk. If other people put their phones down and were willing to come hang out with me without their phones, that would work. And so that's literally where Reconnect came from. Was it just takes a group of people to put all their phones away together to connect.
Yeah. Wow. Did you start that at your school then, in high school?
Yeah. I had the first events when I was a junior in high school. And it was just me and like 20 other friends who all put their phones away. And we went to this big tree in my neighborhood. And people brought frisbees and hammocks and soccer balls, and everybody just hung out. Everybody left their phones in their car. And I mean, people loved it. It was awesome.
That is amazing. Okay. Gosh, it takes people like you, and it's so interesting. I mean, you're fighting this from your end with the youth, but it's like, I keep thinking about how parents are interacting with their phones and how we need to kind of shift society regarding that as well. I just think there's a lot for parents to learn here when it comes to our kids using devices and us using devices and all the things. But tell me about the journey of Reconnect after that. So you expanded quite a bit, right?
Yes. So Reconnect then kind of took its course, because I went to college, and then I took Reconnect with me. And I started the first Reconnect club at Rollins College here in Winter Park in Florida. And it was, in high school, it was cool and people had a great time, but it was my friends, so it was kind of like, I never shut up about it. So they knew that I was all into like no phones and stuff. So they wanted to come support me. But when I went and started the first college chapter, I set up a booth, like a Club Rush booth.
Okay.
And we passed out flyers. And within 24 hours, we had 70 student signups for the club. And so that's when I was like, whoa, okay, this is resonating,
Yeah.
And throughout that semester, I mean, I just watched, seemingly socially anxious Gen Z, typical like, oh, Gen Z, these kids can't talk, like I remember this notable story. This one girl showed up to a college event we were hosting, and she showed up like 5 minutes early. And so there weren't that many people there. And so I was like small talking with her, and she was just like so I could just see it on her face. She was terrified of the small talk, and it was really awkward. And then everybody showed up. It was maybe like 15, 20 people at the event. And I remember forgetting about it. Halfway through the event, I see her, and we're doing this conversation game where everybody talks to everybody one-on-one. At some point we rotate. And I just saw her like talking to this person, like laughing, making jokes, like talking with her hands, like being so expressive. And I was like, who is this? How did this happen?
Yeah, that literally makes me want to cry. So cool.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing was I gave her the environment for interacting, because think of it. She's going through her college day. She's walking across campus. She's walking past people like this that are like glancing up at her. She's walking through a library with people doing the same thing. So it's when you go to Reconnect and everybody is interacting, everybody wants to interact. They're there for that reason. It's actually an environment that is conducive for that, being able to be yourself and being able to connect. And that's really where we've discovered the power is.
Do you feel like once these young adults have experienced, or even teenagers have experienced this, do you feel like they take those habits through to other experiences?
So great question. And I can say, yes, absolutely. I've heard students that say, this girl, I don't think was the one who told me. This is another student that said this, but she, after the first couple of Reconnect events, I saw her. She showed up to the first one, and then she was just at like all 5 for the rest of the semester, however many. And she came up to me after and was like, "Hey, I just wanted you to tell you, like, after being in this club, I have been actively more outgoing. I have gone up to random people I don't know and talked to them, started conversations with kids on the bus, other students, and I just like." She said that it broke the like seal of fear for her. Like she knew that it was possible. And so she just started doing it. And she knew that she had the confidence in herself to do so after being a part of the club.
Yeah. Wow, Sean, this is so cool. I love this. So I want to know, do you still have your flip phone?
So great question. I do not still have a flip phone.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I wish I could, but that's a good question though. And that is, and that really goes into this differentiation of Reconnect, and it actually was from the very beginning. I still have a phone because I realized even then that a flip phone wasn't sustainable. I knew that especially an adult is not going to be able to have a flip phone. There's too much work and requirements of being connected all day to give up your phone completely. So when it all started, the name Reconnect and the idea and everything, it came from this week that I broke my arm skating. Yeah. And all of my friends went to the beach to stay at a beach condo to go surfing for like all week. And I was so devastated. I was like stuck, I couldn't go. I was just so sad and still, but it forced me to be still. I was a very busy kid. I was always hanging out doing something.
Yeah.
And so it kind of forced me to sit with myself and think about the things that I was passionate about and the ideas that I was having about these things. And I was sitting at my table one night, and I had just had this really long conversation with my mom, and I got pretty emotional about everything. And she went up to go to bed, and I stayed down there. She told me to like draw out my feelings. It's something I used to do as a kid. Like when I was really overwhelmed, that draw it out. And so I drew this smartphone that was cracked and like destroyed, like all cracked all over. Cause I was just so angry at phones, and so that's how I expressed it. And underneath it, I wrote disconnect, because I just wanted so badly to disconnect from my phones. And then I realized that it wasn't actually going to work if I was only focusing on disconnecting from your phone. Because the thing is, phones are good and they're needed and they do so much good for the world. You can never focus on just the negative, because if you're pointing at the bad stuff, that's all you're doing. You're not building anything new. And so that's when I drew a flip phone. Oh my gosh, that's where maybe where that idea came from. But I drew a flip phone. And then I wrote Reconnect under it as the opposite, because the focus of Reconnect is not to get rid of your phone or destroy phones. The focus is to reconnect in person without the presence of our phones.
Yeah.
And so that's a more sustainable solution for the actual in-person interaction, because if I was going to a college campus and saying, "Hey guys, everybody throw your phones in a dumpster, join me, get a flip phone," I would get 0 signups. But because I'm just saying, guys, all you have to do is put your phone away and be together for an hour and a half to connect.
Yeah.
That is possible and that is scalable. And that's why I truly believe, and my goal is to bring this to every college in the nation over the next few years.
For real. It's just prioritizing the human to human connection over and giving just bits of time for that. It's not all the time. Do you still have that drawing?
Yes, it is. in a special place.
Okay.
It's in this filing cabinet in my office. And I have this all caps thing I wrote when I was like 16. It says The Originals, and it's underlined a bunch.
Cute.
Yeah.
That's a really cool thing to have, though. Okay. And then I wonder, now that you have a smartphone, because, we're adults and I have to be active on Instagram, I have to check my emails throughout the day, and it is a tool, but it's also distracting and addictive and all the things. So how do you maintain that balance now?
Yeah, great question. So I have so many friends that I've met in this space that give me the best tips on how to, have better habits with my phone and how to, kind of do better by myself. But I'll say, I am not perfect. I am on my phone too much. I watch too much YouTube. It's a thing that I kind of have to have an ebb and flow with, Yeah. But what I found works for me, and this doesn't work for everybody, but my clubs are now student run. So the two active clubs that are hosting events, the students are the student leadership teams run them. So they run their own Instagram accounts for their clubs. So I don't have to use Instagram for my work, which is really helpful. So I have I have a 2-minute limit on Instagram for the day, which sounds ridiculous, right? Yeah. But this is why it works for me, because I set a screen time limit for 2 minutes, and I gave the password to my brother, who's my roommate. So in order for me to actually click the thing that's like, oh, just a little more time, because I would just always click that when I had it before. Yeah. I have to text my brother, say, hey, I want to scroll on Instagram. And I never do it, because that's the barrier in place for myself.
Yeah, totally.
And so, but with the 2 minutes, it kind of, sometimes I just have this pull to look at it. And I'll look at it for 2 minutes. I'll look at 2 posts. And then by the time the thing comes up, I'm like, I'm angry for like a split second. I'm like, I wanted to see that. And then I'm like, oh wait, this is stupid. It's not real. Never mind. Yeah. So it kind of like lets my brain go through the cycle and then remember, and it kind of fixes the trick for me.
Yeah. Interesting. I have that setting on the phone where if it gets too close to your face, it like pauses and says, back it up or something. And then you have to wait. You have to wait like a few seconds, and then it'll let you click something to like get back to the screen. And every time that happens, I just put it down, because I'm so, maybe not every time, but a lot of times, because I'm so annoyed with it. It just gives you that pause of like, oh wait, what am I doing? Like, get that out of my face. So I love that setting. Thank you, Apple, for one thing you've done right. What advice though for parents? So parents are listening, and I'm starting to talk more about our behavior, mirroring positive behavior as adults, because our children are going to copy what we do. We can tell them all day not to use their phones, but if we're using it, they're going to think that that's normal and that's allowed. What should parents be reflecting on related to our behavior? And then maybe we can talk about some advice for like our decisions with our kids.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is actually something that I have recently actually had kind of a breakthrough on. And I'm not a parent, so I haven't had a chance to implement this with parent groups just yet, but the idea made sense, and my mom thought it was a good idea. Similar to the way Reconnect works, Reconnect is a buy-in from the students, because I don't do Reconnect clubs at like middle school and high school campuses. I do it on college campuses, because they're the people who are in charge of their own decisions, and they can choose like, I'm going to put my phone away, and they're kind of like at that point.
Yeah.
And so that also applies though to parents of young kids, because they still kind of control what their kids do. They have to. And so I thought could work for parents is having phone-free play dates with other families, because it's not so much pressure on, trying to get a family, okay, can you not give your kid a phone because I didn't give my kid a phone? That's like kind of a tall order. A lot of parents have, they want to track their kids. They want to be in touch with their kids, or whatever their reasons are. They have a phone already, and it's tough to take it away from them.
Yeah.
So what you could do, which could be really productive to kind of start replanting the seeds of a non-phone based childhood and a free play for your kids, is have these phone-free play dates. So get together with just one family, one other parent that has, little kids your age, and they can all hang out. But the parents also go phone.
Yeah.
So the parents will put their phone away. And then that way, when you're like, kids, there's no iPads for this play date, they're going to fuss and they're going to be mad at first. They're going to be like, are you kidding me? They're going to be like, hey, we're not using ours either. And they're going to fuss. But in 5 minutes, they're going to be running around throwing sticks, climbing trees or whatever it is, because they're going to forget. And then they're going to get that experience ingrained in them into childhood, where it's like, oh, I have so much more fun when me and my friends don't go on our iPad, because that's what happened with that kid in the dorm. He realized when I'm off my phone and I'm making friends and we're hanging out, that's way more fun than just sitting on my iPhone. And so those kids will realize that, and you can lead by example as parents.
Yeah. And empowering them with that. Like they know how they feel when they're using their device versus when they're doing something in real life. And those are the kind of things we can ingrain in them through their experiences so that when they're an adult, they make safer choices. But yeah, you definitely hit on something with the play date situation, because it is tricky. My oldest is 9 and she's starting to have certain friends with phones. And I feel like if they're coming over and I don't allow the kids to have phones, that they need to leave it with me or leave it on the kitchen table. It's not to be used unless they need to call their parent. I can't control that when my daughter's going to their house. Or say a lot of people will be like on a family vacation with different families that have different decisions, and then kids are sharing devices. And so this is a very tricky situation that parents find themselves in. So I appreciate the setting. I don't know. I'm not afraid though to say if my kid's going over to another kid's house, like, hey, to the parent, like, hey, she doesn't use devices, so I would appreciate it's tricky. It's tricky because that's their home and their decision. It's very tricky. So I love that removing it from the parents as well. That's really cool.
I think, and also it is tricky. And my thing that I would want to say is, baby steps are just as important as, getting really far in this race. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think it's harder to get someone else to get on board with you sometimes, especially because, and I spoke about this with a friend of mine who is older. I think he has like 5-year-old kids and a 2-year-old. And what he'll run into is the parent will say, well, what's the big deal? Like, I'm not going to put away my phone, that's not going to change anything. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
And so, if you do run into that, I just want to say, baby steps are there. Don't get too discouraged. I ran into that when I started Reconnect. There were just as many kids that were like, that's stupid, I'm not putting my phone away. It wasn't some magical thing. Like, I got a lot of hate for it too.
Yeah.
So I would say, there's got to be one family that feels the same way as you. And that's all you need, because then your kids are going to have someone. Because that's the biggest problem that I've seen with this issue is those 2 kids that might be the only 2 kids in the grade without a phone, but they're both so isolated because, they're the only ones without it. And so if they could just put their phones away or not have their phones and be together, then that totally changes the game.
Yeah.
And so just baby steps and we'll get further. People will catch on.
Yeah. And having one other kid, like you said, is really important. Just somebody else to connect with that's in the same boat. And I do think parents, especially with younger kids, are really seeing the harms and really deciding to delay and talk to each other about it and have book clubs around, anxious generation and start really sharing these messages. So do you feel like kids need smartphones at all? Or do you feel like parents should be giving their kids more of the kids safe phone options or dumb phones or flip phones? Do you think the benefits of having that full access outweigh all the negative consequences of it?
Yes. So my belief from me being a kid that grew up with all of this is that kids have no business having a smartphone until they're at least, especially not a smartphone with full access. I mean, that's just absurd. Until they're like at least 16. And I probably still wouldn't give that to my kid at that age,
Okay.
I think it should be like smoking, where like we're going to look back on this and it's going to be, we're going to be aghast. We're going to be looking back at pictures of kids with smartphones and iPads the same way we look back at people that are driving with a beer in their hand in the 80s. Yeah. That is how we're going to look at this. All of the people that I talked to in my clubs, all my club leaders and I did little mini interviews with my student leaders. And I asked them, like, would you give your kid a phone when they were, once you have kids? And all of them said, absolutely not. They're never getting a phone until they're not getting a phone. No way. I went through it. They're not doing that. And that's most people in my generation feel that same feeling about it.
Good.
And so, I think that all schools should be phone free up until high school, and that kids, I'm definitely not going to give my kids phones. That's my feeling about it.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree. And that's what's going to happen in my household too. So, okay, Seán, this was so incredible learning about your story. Where can parents or anybody connect with you? Well, especially college students who are looking to maybe have Reconnect come to their college or attend one of the events you guys have going on now.
please reach out if you're a student or college student, or if you're a parent who has a kid going into college and wants a community like this, because we have all the tools. We have bi-weekly, Zoom meetings with all of the student leaders where they all get to connect, and, you can meet all the other students doing this. We have all the events and tools to host everything and lead everything and get everything started at your school. So you can email me, Seán, Sean, at reconnectmovement.com. You can go to my website, thereconnectmovement.com. I am currently writing a book as well that will release in the spring of 2026. So look out for that. I mean, maybe I'll be back on by then. Something.
Yeah, we'll do. I need an early copy.
Sweet. Hey, I will. No, seriously, I need people to look at it. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, reach out if you're a college student or if you're anyone that has a question.
Thank you, Seán.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
You're welcome.